So we were where? Around page 30, was it? What?
2 middle way schools, that section.
Page 30 on the PDF, yes. Okay. Yes, it's... Why aren't you going to page 30? Okay, we did that. We did definitive and provisional. Okay, the two middle way schools. Yeah, page 30 of the booklet, page 36 of the PDF. Okay, so the great Indian master, Nagarjuna, was the founder of the Middle Way School. Of course, people who are founders of schools never have the motivation to found a school or to find a tradition. Yeah, they just do their practice, they teach what they know is correct, and it's their followers who make traditions and schools out of it. Yeah, so, you know, we have all these different Buddhist traditions and different tenet schools, and the Buddha didn't say, I'm teaching Vaibhasika, I'm teaching Svatantrika, I'm teaching Chittamatra, I'm teaching Madhyamaka. It's people afterwards who did that. So it's interesting, you know, to think, you know, Nagarjuna's role, same with Tsongkhapa, you know, they didn't intend to start things. They just taught the Dharma. Okay, so he was the founder of the Middle Way School, unintentionally. And his most famous work is his Fundamentals of the Middle Way, also translated as treatise, you know, treatise on the Middle Way. Yeah. So it's Madhyamaka-Karika. So among the many commentaries to Nagarjuna's text by subsequent Indian masters, those by Buddha Palita, Baba Viveka, and Chandakirti were particularly important, especially in the Tibetan tradition, not so much in the Chinese tradition, because by the time Chandakirti had not yet lived, was not yet alive at the time when so many scriptures went from India to China. But he, you know, his teachings remained, and they went to Tibet later on, and so they were still, you know, around in India at that time. Okay. Baba Viveka criticized some aspects of the interpretations made earlier by Buddha Palita. In defense of Buddha Palita, Chandakirti wrote the highly influential commentary entitled Clear Words, or Pasanapada. So this, you know, here you have the argument, you know, between Baba Viveka and Buddha Palita and Chandakirti, okay? Because Buddha Palita put forth one view, Baba Viveka said, no, it's not like that. Chandakirti stepped in, you know, a century or two later and said, no, it is like Buddha Palita said. And so the debate has continued on from there. Okay. And, you know, everybody justifies their position by quoting parts of the previous one's writings that they either agree with or disagree with. Yeah. In the case of, you know, Baba Viveka and being criticized by Buddha Palita, Baba Viveka was dead by the time Buddha Palita wrote, so he never had a chance to stick up for his own views. What? Baba Viveka lived after Buddha Palita. Yeah, I'm sorry. Okay, so by the time Chandrakirti came along and stuck up for Buddha Palita and criticized Baba Viveka, okay, Baba Viveka was no longer alive. He couldn't stick up for himself. So I've always wondered what would happen, or, what would have happened if he had been alive and in person, entered into that debate. So one of the principal differences between Buddha Palita's and Baba Viveka's interpretations has to do with the notion of commonly appearing objects. Oh, yes. So Tsongkhapa goes into this in great detail in his Lamrim Chenmo, the third volume in the English translation. And it's very, very difficult, this whole debate between, talking about Baba Viveka, Buddha Palita, and Chandrakirti. And when His Holiness was teaching this one year in Dharamsala, I remember somebody who was, a real scholar of this material, said, "Oh, it was Betsy Napper." Yeah, and she made the comment to me, "It's only a few Geshis who understand what His Holiness is teaching now." And that was I appreciated that, because the only thing I understood that Tsongkhapa said was bumpa, which means vase. So I knew what a vase was. Everything else, I don't know. It was, really dicey. Okay, so one of the big sticky points is the notion of commonly appearing objects. That is, when engaged in a discourse on the ultimate mode of being of things, whether it is possible for two opposing parties to have a shared perception of an object that is equally valid from the perspectives of both parties. Baba Viveka asserts that this is possible. In asserting an objective reality in some measure independent of the perceiver, Baba Viveka accepts that a degree of inherent existence can be attributed to phenomena. Okay. For example, Baba Viveka seems to maintain that although the person or self is a mental construct contingent upon the aggregates, if one searches for a true referent of the term person, one should be able to find something that is substantially real. Baba Viveka singles out the mental consciousness as being the true person that can be found under ultimate analysis. Chandrakirti refutes this idea. Okay, there's two things in this paragraph where there's differences. So first, the commonly appearing object. Okay, so if you have somebody, let's say the Svatantrika Madhyamaka School and somebody from the Prasangika Madhyamaka School, maybe not from that school, but having those viewpoints, okay, and they're going to debate about whether things truly exist or not, and they make a syllogism or a consequence or whatever, are just the objects they're talking about, are they seeing them in the same way? Okay? And Baba Viveka says yes, because things do have a degree of inherent existence. So he refutes true existence, but not inherent existence. For the Prasangikas, those two terms are synonymous. And, Chandrakirti refutes both of them. So what are they talking about? If you have a syllogism, okay, the vase, yeah, my dear Boompa, yeah. So the vase is empty of inherent existence because it's a dependent arising. When they look at the vase, are these two different parties seeing the vase in the same way? Okay, yeah. So Buddha Palita says yes, because the vase it lacks true existence, but it does have some degree of inherent existence. Bhava Viveka, didn't I say Bhava Viveka? Sorry. All their names start with B's, Couldn't they start with an R or something instead, so I could talk about, thank you for catching me on this. Okay, so Bhava Viveka says yes, because everything has a degree of inherent existence, and we all accept valid cognizers. Our sense consciousnesses are valid cognizers, so they see these objects in the same way. Our mental consciousness sees these objects in the same way because that's the way the vase exists. Okay? Yeah, Chandrakirti says, Actually, Chandrakirti says, what our sense consciousnesses are mistaken because things appear to them to be inherently existent, whereas they aren't. So somebody from who's debating the Prasangika viewpoint, is going to look at, if you're talking about the vase as the subject of your syllogism, is not going to see the vase the same way that Buddha Palita does. Okay, because Buddha Palita is seeing an inherent, Bhava Viveka is seeing an inherently existent vase, and Buddha Palita is seeing what? And Chandrakirti, both of them, would be seeing a vase that lacks inherent existence. Okay, so they would say, that there's no commonly appearing object. And why is that important? Because if you're already accepting that the vase has inherent existence, like Bhava Viveka does, then you can't really have an open-minded debate because you've already set up your conclusion. Okay? And you see it that way, and so you're not going to budge. So there's no way for debate using like a syllogistic process in that way. Okay? So that's one way that they differ, in terms of how you debate, and we'll get into that a minute later. But, Bhava Viveka is saying, well, I do say things inherently exist because if, I negate true existence, but I accept inherent existence. So Bhava Viveka has different definitions for the two of those, okay? So Bhava Viveka says, yes, there's got to be something that is the self, because if there isn't something when you fully investigate that you can identify as being the person, then your only conclusion is that the person doesn't exist. That is the extreme of nihilism. And so, as a good Madhyamaka, he rejects nihilism. But he's still on the absolutist viewpoint, asserting inherent existence. Okay, so what does Bhava Viveka assert as the person? The mental consciousness. Okay, so, we're good Prasangikas, right? And so, we side with Tsongkhapa, Chandrakirti, all these Svatantrika Madhyamikas, they're just clinging onto inherent existence. But, there's got to be something that is the person. Because Something goes from one life to the next life that carries the karma. There's got to be something that's the person. And besides, I feel it inside me. Yes, I'm none of the aggregates, but I feel there's a me inside me, that I didn't create, that's just there, that's the foundation of my whole existence. Oh, so maybe the Svatantrikas are right. Oh, what a relief. Yeah, I don't have to be a Prasangika after all. Do you find yourself going back and forth between these two viewpoints whenever there's a teaching on emptiness? It's like, yeah, the refutation, no inherent existence, you can't find anything that is the person. Yeah, that makes sense. But I feel it. And also there's got to be logically something that goes from one life to the next. And it's got to be the mental consciousness, because it's certainly not the body. It's got to be the mental consciousness. Then, you have some snooty Prasangika that comes along and says, okay, yeah, but what about when there's no manifest mental consciousness? Can you say that there is a continuous thing that is always the person, that always carries the karma? What about in states of deep sleep? What about in the God realm where there's no perception? What about, when people faint? What about the, subtlest mind? Yeah, there's no cognition at that point. So how can you say the gross mental consciousness is the person that always exists and always carries the karma? So then you, who is now a good Svatantrika Madhyamaka convert, free of that Prasangika stuff, you look at the Prasangikas and you say, yes, but, and then you repeat your argument again. Yeah, meaning that you don't really have anything extra to offer to validate your position. Yeah, because it's clear the coarse mental consciousness is not always manifest and doing its job. Okay, so this whole thing about what carries the karmic seeds has been one of the big issues of debate even before the Buddha appeared on the scene, And why? Is it because you can't find something when you search for it. But we all have this subtle grasping at inherent existence, and we feel it. And besides, there's got to be something consistent that really is the person. Okay, says our innate self-grasping. Okay, so there we're confronted, with our innate self-grasping. Yeah, and that's the very thing that we feel inside is the whole basis for me. And yet the Prasangikas are refuting it, and it's hard to contradict them. Yeah, we saw that the Chittamadrans, avoided that by asserting a foundation consciousness. Yeah, and they said, oh yes, external objects are empty. Yeah, they're empty of being produced by a separate latency from the consciousness perceiving them. So yes, they're empty. Yeah. But they're not empty of inherent existence, because our foundation consciousness is the person, and it inherently exists. So, this is the topic of the big debate, yeah, that really, touches at something very fundamental in how we feel about ourselves and how we look at everything in the world. Yeah? And so Prasangikas are saying, our sense consciousnesses are mistaken. They perceive inherent existence that does not exist. Okay? Then Satantrikas say, well, if they're mistaken, how can they be valid cognizers? Okay, so Tantrikas are finding something to fight back against. And Prasangikas say, well, in the realm of conventionalities, where everything is produced mistakenly, you can still determine one aspect of validity, because if you couldn't, then nobody could say this is a thermos, and this is a gong, and this is a clock, and this is a computer. So yes, our senses and our mental consciousness are that speaks and labels things and designates objects. Yes, there is an element of validity in that, because that's how we communicate with each other. It's when we think that besides things existing conventionally, based on being designated and a common appearance, that we can kind of all agree on, that if you try and assert anything else really being the object, then you're falling to absolutism. Okay, so the debate continues. Mm-hmm. So it's really interesting, try and play with that. Last week, your assignment was to look at things and kind of try and see them as if they were, they're not external objects from their own side, but they're produced by the same latency on your mind stream that is producing your sense consciousnesses and mental consciousness that's perceiving them. So, yeah, practice with that. Now, this week, practice with, how things appear to my senses is not how they exist. And then you try and find, well, what is the faulty appearance to my senses? Yeah, because we've never questioned that. We are firmly convinced that, how we perceive things, not only what we perceive, but how we perceive it is correct. Okay, so this is a clock, yeah? So this has some clock nature. How we perceive this is valid, we say, yeah. But it's really got some clock nature. So it's not just a clock, but it has a clock nature. And it's because it has that clock nature that, therefore, it's valid for us to call it a clock. Yeah. And then Prasangikas say, Yeah, what are you going to say is the clock nature that is the real clock in this thing? Yeah. His Holiness had said when he was a kid, he used to like taking watches apart. So I think he was doing an investigation. What is the real watch when you take it apart? Is it the face? Is it the hands? Is it the, he was using the old ones, remember that you have to wind the thing to get it to work? Yeah. And there's the gears inside, but where is the clock? Okay. Prasangikas say you're not going to find something that is the clock, but that doesn't mean the clock doesn't exist. It means it's empty of inherent existence, but it does exist because we use it. Yeah? Yeah. And then Prasangikas say, yeah, we can prove things exist conventionally without existing inherently, because the Svatantrika Madhyamikas say they have to exist inherently to exist conventionally. Otherwise, they're non-existent. Yeah. Prasangikas say, no, that's not necessary. Yeah. Why? Well, first of all, in the world, or at least in English-speaking countries, there's some worldly renown that this is a clock. Okay. That's one characteristic. Second characteristic is there's no valid cognizer on a conventional level that says that can prove that this isn't a clock. Can you find somebody that can prove that this is a giraffe? Yeah? And no, you can't. There's no, conventional valid cognizer that can say that it isn't. Okay. Now, so that's second criteria. Third criteria, there's no cognizer of the ultimate that can refute it. Okay. Now, a cognizer of the ultimate, that's one that sees emptiness. Okay. If you're saying that the clock is inherently existent, and that's what you're asserting this is, then yes, there is an ultimate, a valid cognizer of the ultimate that can refute this, because that cognizer sees the clock as empty of inherent existence. Okay? So if you're asserting an inherently existent clock, you have the first two criteria, but the third one says no, there's no conventional inherent existence. Yeah? But Prasangikas say, we're just working on the level of conventionalities. And a mind that perceives emptiness does not have in its purview the ability to perceive conventional objects. Okay? Only a Buddha can perceive the ultimate and conventional truths at the same time. Yeah. So just as an auditory consciousness cannot perceive sights and sounds, okay? Yeah, just as our visual consciousness cannot perceive tastes, those things are out of the purview of that kind of consciousness. So too, a mind that is directly realizing emptiness, only emptiness appears to that consciousness. No conventional phenomena appear. So that consciousness cannot refute just the conventional existence of the clock, because the clock is not even appearing to it because it's perceiving the emptiness of the clock. Okay? So the Prasangikas say, yeah, there are conventionally existent clocks. No problem. The world can still function. Okay? So within that, so we can all agree that it's a clock. And we all can accept if somebody from Quebec comes and calls it a katanan? catalog? I learned French in high school.
I would call that a cadran. C-A-D-R-A-N, cadran.
Okay. Yeah, nobody would deny you could call it that. Nobody can deny that if you speak Chinese, you call it a shishong. Yeah, shishong. Shishong. Okay, yeah. So we accept that there's different names for conventionally existent objects, okay? Where our grasping at inherent existence arises, though, is when we talk about judgments, and especially, whether we say something is good or bad, or somebody is guilty or innocent. Yeah, we will form an opinion and think that that inheres in the object or in the person. Yeah, so I'm trying to pick my example here. Yeah. When you add vinegar and orange juice to chocolate chip cookies, yeah, then I say that is sickening. Stop it, cancel it, don't make those things, okay? Because that bad taste inheres in those fake chocolate chip cookies. Yeah. Then, the cook who made them says, but they're delicious. And half of the community says, not bad. They don't have sugar in them. Yeah? They don't have sugar, they don't have wheat flour, they don't have dairy. Yeah. They have orange juice, which is nourishing, yeah, and some kind of fake butter, and vinegar, which is, the new health food that they're going to be marketing. And it's good. We should eat this. It tastes good. Yeah. Oh, and then conflict, because my view is inherently, objectively real. And these cooks are saying, our view is objectively real. And next, we're also going to cook them with beans. Yeah? Because then they'll really be nourishing chocolate chip bean cookies. Yeah? So, I can see them look in the back row. They are so smiling, planning how many cups of beans they're going to put. You should make sure you put cooked beans. Don't put raw beans in. Okay. Well, you could try raw beans. I mean, let's be creative. I know that's what it's all about. Okay, but we dig into our position as if, it has some inherent value. And, and it's inherently true. Yeah. And it's not. Yeah. Somebody will eat that whole batch of merely designated cookies, which are not real cookies. Cookies don't taste like that. I say, and they say, well, this is new. Why can't we call them cookies? They look like cookies. They're nourishing. Okay. Yeah. Then, there's also the debate about the pitch to start the chanting. You know, what is a suitable pitch so that many people can join the chanting? Yeah. And so the sopranos say, Namo Shakya Muni Buddha. You know, that's a good pitch to start with. And then other people say, Namo Shakya Muni. Okay, and then there's a school that says, how about something in the middle? Yeah, let's practice middle way politics here. Okay, and it's difficult to agree, isn't it? And we divide into our camps, and we, you know, want the things to start at a certain pitch. So now people can get a real insight to what goes on at monasteries. You know, the topics of conversation, you know, they aren't about how all sentient beings are suffering. There's about how I'm suffering from having to listen to you start at the pitches I don't like. Okay, maybe we better come back to this chapter. What is Holiness is saying. But I'm trying to point out how we grasp at inherent existence and how it appears to us mistakenly, and we buy that appearance. Okay? It doesn't mean that from the side of the object they are radiating inherent existence, and we're just seeing it. It means we are imputing through ages, through beginningless affiliation, beginningless familiarity with seeing things as inherently existence. We're projecting that veil and seeing them that way. So even though we talk about, you know, the Buddha doesn't have the appearance of inherent existence, or, you know, when, or we could say, let's use a different example. Well, we could use that one, yeah. When you're in meditative with equipoise, there's no appearance of inherent existence. Okay, yeah. I lost my train of thought trying to think of another example. Let's continue. My train of thought will come back to me. Okay, so based on these differences, two principal divisions of the middle way philosophy arose. Okay, I remember what it is. Yeah. That we, even though we say the appearance of inherent existence doesn't appear, okay, and by saying the appearance of inherent existence, it may sound to us as if the object is from its side appearing inherent existence, as if it has inherent existence and it's appearing that way. Okay? Yeah. But it's not that. It's our mind, you know, the latency of ignorance on our mind, that creates that filter, that screen that colors everything as inherently existent. Okay, so it's not coming from the object, it's coming from our mind. And this is one reason why when they talk about, you know, the real object, you know, to eliminate, to become a Buddha, they say the cognitive obscurations. Yeah, and we may say, well, what about the afflictive obscurations? Well, if you eliminate the cognitive ones, you must have eliminated the afflictive ones before that, okay? But the cognitive ones are the ones that make, the cognitive obscurations are the ones that make things appear to us as if they were inherently existent. They're the ones that create that false appearance. And that has to be eliminated in order for the full potential of our mind to be active and be omniscient. So that's why they say that's the real one to get at. But of course, to get at that one, we have to first overcome the afflictive obscurations. Okay, back to His Holiness. Based on these differences, two principal divisions of the Middle Way philosophy arose. The differences between these two groups are reflected in the method used by their followers to establish emptiness. So here's another difference between Svatantrika Madhyamikas and Prasangika Madhyamikas. Following the method used by Nagarjuna in his Fundamentals of the Middle Way, Buddha Palita principally uses a form of reasoning known as consequentialist or prasanga in Sanskrit. This reductio ad absurdum reasoning proceeds primarily by demonstrating internal inconsistencies in the views of an opponent. Okay, so whoever you are debating with, you're trying to show how their viewpoint is wrong, what they're asserting when you apply logic and reasoning can be refuted. It doesn't make sense. So that's how the Prasangikas debate, okay? Okay, in contrast, Bhavaviveka and his followers reason from the basis of established syllogisms. Okay, due to this difference in methodology, these two schools came to be known as Svatantrika, or autonomous school, referring to those who reason on the basis of syllogisms, and the Prasangika school referring to those who prefer the consequentialist style of reasoning. The Svatantrika school was later upheld by Indian masters such as Janagarbha, while the Prasangika school was upheld by Chandrakirti and Shantideva. Okay, so there's two ways of reasoning. The syllogisms, which we've learned, the vase is empty of inherent existence because it's dependent arising. Okay, and then the Prasangika viewpoint would be to refute inherent existence, to say that the vase is not a dependent arising because it inherently exists. Okay, and the Svatantrikas go, well, yes, it inherently exists, but you're saying that because it inherently exists, it can't be a dependent arising. So it's contradicting what the Svatantrikas say. Yeah. But one of the basic principles of Svatantrika, of all Buddhist schools, is that things are dependent arising. Okay? So what the Prasangikas are doing is they're saying, okay, Svatantrika, we're going to pretend we agree with you that things have inherent existence. But if that's the case, then what are you going to say? If logically that means that things are not dependent arising. And then Bhavaviveka says, okay, we got to think of something. And they get stuck. Okay? So saying that they are using these two different types of reasoning doesn't mean that Prasangikas never use syllogisms. Okay, they do use syllogisms when they're debating. And it doesn't mean that Svatantrika Madhyamikas never use consequences. They do, okay? So these some people say, it's really strange that these two modes of reasoning were the names given to these two branches of Madhyamaka, when that really isn't the the big thing that they disagree with. Yes, they disagree with that, but it's not the big thing. Okay, so it is clearly evident from reading his commentary on Nagarjuna's Fundamentals of the Middle Way that Buddha Palita did not accept the notion of inherent existence, even conventionally. Okay, so the Svatantrika Madhyamika say, yes, there's inherent existence, conventionally, but not ultimately. Okay. And the way they say this, okay, is through how they assert conventional existence. So they say to be conventionally existent, things are designated, yeah, things are designated, yeah, by the force of appearing to a non-deceptive awareness. Okay, so what's this non-deceptive awareness? Well, it's the awareness that perceives inherent existence. Yeah, and to designate something, yeah, there has to be some element of inherent existence, otherwise the clock would be a giraffe or a rhinoceros or a hippopotamus. I'm using Singaporean pronunciation for rhinoceros and hippopotamus. We have interesting conversations. There's also orangutans, not orangutans. Yeah. Okay, anyway, yeah. So they're saying, the Svatantrikas, that yes, because they have to assert things as conventionally existence. But the way they avoid the extreme of nihilism is by saying conventionally they inherently exist. Why? Because, to conventionally exist, on one hand, yes, they have to be designated. They have to be designated. There's no true existence of the clock in here. But, yeah, if we say that they, lacked inherent existence conventionally, then we would have to say that they didn't exist at all, but they do exist. Yeah, they're designated by the force of appearing to a non-defective consciousness. My unconsciousness sees this clock and knows it's a clock. Okay, so while the Prasangikas say to exist conventionally, the mere designation and our agreement on the terms we use is enough. Yeah? The Svatantrikas say that's not enough to conventionally exist. There's got to be also some consciousness that is a non-defective consciousness has to see it. Yeah. And that non-defective consciousness sees that there's something in there that is the person, something in there that is the clock. Yeah. Of course, when I always ask my teachers, well, what then would Buddha Palita, what then would Bhava Viveka, okay, he says the mental consciousness is the person. Okay. But when he looked at the clock, what would he say is the clock? The inherent nature of the clock. I haven't, I have yet to meet a Svatantrika who can tell me that. Yeah. Because that's where they get stuck. Yeah. But then, but they also have a reason, because if there wasn't something in it that was a clock, then it could be a giraffe. Yeah. And then anything could be anything. Yeah, so that's why January 6th was a festival of love. Anything can be anything. There's you know, that's how you get around it. Yeah, anything can be anything. Okay. Okay. So when commenting on Nagarjuna's opening verse, which negates the four possible types of origination, okay? So this is how, okay, this is the arguments, that first verse in Nagarjuna's text that really, everybody quotes all the time, where he is, disproving any possibility of inherent dependent arising. Yeah, okay? So 4 possible types of arising. Yeah, can things arise from themselves? Can they arise from other? Do they arise from both self and others, or from neither self and others? Okay, so when commenting on that verse, Buddha Palita observes that if we subject the process of arising to critical analysis, arising itself cannot be found to exist. I'm using the word arising because I know you guys like to use the standard terms. Yeah, I know that's what it says here. I like to use dependent origination when talking about the 12 links, okay? But there's many other kinds of dependent arising that are not the 12 links. So I find it more helpful to use the general term dependent arising, which would include the 12 links, but also all the other ways of dependent arising.
I learned it as production, which would limit that arising.
Yeah. Yeah, sometimes they say production too instead of origination. But arising usually means produce. Although, the Prasangikas do define dependent arising in a slightly different way to include permanent phenomena. Okay, but here, production, arising, origination. What we're talking about is things arising, coming into existence from a cause. How do things, come into existence? How do they arise? Okay. So Buddha Palita observes that if we subject the process of arising to critical analysis, arising itself cannot be found to exist. Why? Because if you really examine what is arising, well, we would say, it's something coming into existence. Well, what exactly is the arising? Well, it's a sprout sprouting from a seed. Well, what moment? Is it the first moment that the sprout initially comes out of the seed? Is that the arising? Is it the second moment? And then you get into debate. Well, what is it that first? Can you actually find that first moment where something starts to appear from the seed? Yeah, it's an interesting question to ask some biologists. What is the first moment? Yeah, and as soon as, of course, as you define a first moment, that first moment has beginning, middle, and end, and you get into, you can't find it, Okay, so, when exactly does arising occur? Yeah, when exactly does that thing become a sprout? Yeah, because when it's something initially comes out of it, yes, something is sprouting, but that teeny tiny thing you don't call a sprout. Yeah. So when does it become a sprout? Okay, so in this way you would have to say, well, we can't find an inherently existent arising because we can't identify at what moment that happens. This is the debate, at what moment does conception happen? Yeah? What is the moment of conception? Is it when the sperm and the egg come together? Is it when the consciousness enters? Is the consciousness part of the sperm or the egg before it joins with the other part? Or does the consciousness come in later? Is there even a consciousness, some people say, because it's just the brain. Maybe it's not until the brain develops that then there's a being with consciousness. Okay? It becomes very difficult to point that moment that conception occurs. Yeah? And then when you get into in vitro fertilization, then it becomes even more complicated. His Holiness was asking me about that many years ago. Is it when the consciousness enters the fertilized egg? Because there's this whole debate that it has to attach to the uterus. That actually there's many cases of fertilized eggs, but only usually one attaches to the uterus. Yeah, sometimes you may have two, and that's why you would have fraternal or sorella twins that are not identical twins. Yeah, so this is a thing to figure out. I have no answer. Okay. So if we subject the process of arising to critical analysis, arising itself cannot be found upon analysis to exist. However, since things do arise as a result of causes and conditions, we can see that, that's a fact. Yeah. Buddha Palita explicitly states that we can understand the notion of arising on a conventional level. Okay, so we may not be able to find it when we look for it exactly what it is, but when we don't analyze and we just talk about our daily life, we can say that's a sprout. Yeah. He states further that if phenomena possess an objective inherent nature, it would not be necessary to posit their identity and existence in relation to other factors. This very fact that things and events, that phenomena can only be understood in relation to or in dependence upon other factors, suggests that they do not exist by means of an inherent nature. Okay, so Buddha Palita says, yeah, things do originate because of causes and conditions. Yeah, so we can understand that conventionally, but when we analyze with ultimate analysis being that we're searching for exactly what that thing is, then we cannot find something that an objective inherent nature. Yeah. And he radically says, it would not be necessary to posit their identity that if they possess that kind of nature, that they were inherently existent, then it would not be necessary to posit their identity and existence in relationship to other factors. In other words, okay, we could posit this as a clock without saying, well, it was produced by taking all these different things and gears together and putting it, and it being called a clock. In other words, it wouldn't even need the designation clock, because from its own side it would automatically radiate clock nature. Okay? So the Prasangikas say, yeah, well, if you say that there has to be this element of inherent existence in things on the conventional level, then things don't need to be designated at all. Because if there's something that makes them what they are, conventionally that's sufficient, and there's no need for them to be designated. Okay, so they say that to the Svatantrikas. Yeah. Are you getting what the Prasangikas are saying? Yeah. If this has something in it that is a clock from its own side, then we don't need to label it clocked because it's radiating clockness. Yeah? Yeah, I just love the way January 6th has become a love fest, you know? It's like, it's radiating love fest. Can't you see how happy the people are bashing in those windows? You know, they're so joyous putting their feet on Nancy Pelosi's desk. What fun, we're having such a good time. Okay. So the very fact, Buddhapalita says, that phenomena can only be understood in relationship or dependent on other phenomena. Yeah, we can't identify something, yeah, as a clock without consciousness's labeling clock, and that being something that is renowned, at least in the English-speaking world. Okay, we can't say this is a clock without there being parts to the clock, even though none of the parts are the clock. But the clock exists dependent on its parts. Okay, so everything we talk about, yeah, exists in relationship to other things. First of all, in relationships to its parts, and in relationship to the consciousness that is designating them. Yeah, which is exactly how Prasangikas say they exist. Okay? But there's nothing more than the designated existence. And then we get shaky. No, there has to be something. There really is something that is me, because if there weren't, then when I die, I totally disappear. But I exist. Nothing can destroy me. Do you have that feeling? You know? Yeah, there's something in there. And then, oh, if you're telling me I'm going to die, then I'm destroyed. And that's why people have so much fear of death. They think nothing exists afterwards. Yeah, because they're grasping at an inherently existent person. And they're saying, oh, after death, that person is not going to be there. Yeah, so that's fearful. And the Prasangikas say, listen, it was never there. Yeah, death is not ceasing an inherently existent person. Such a person never existed from the get-go. And then we say, but. And that's why Prasangikas say, think about it. Go over that reasoning again and again and again. Look for the thing that you think is really the person and see if you can find it. Yeah. Become really familiar with that refutation. Yeah. And really look at that subtle feeling of, but I exist and I cannot be destroyed. Yeah? You know, that's the one that's, yeah. That one says, yeah, I don't depend on parts, I don't depend on labeling, but I can never be destroyed. Yeah. Ha 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 ha. Yeah. Well, you never existed to start with. So don't be afraid of being destroyed because you were never there. Okay, Bhava Viveka agreed that with Buddha Palita that all modes of arising have no ultimate inherent existence. But he argued that the process of arising of things from factors other than themselves, has a conventional inherent existence. Chandrakirti, in defense of Buddha Palita's position, explicitly rejects this. Chandrakirti states that both the subject, the person who experiences both pain and pleasure, and the objects of that person, pain, pleasure, clocks, rhinoceros, and so forth, yeah, and the objects that both the pain and pleasure and the objects of that person are revealed to be unfindable, possessing no objective inherent reality, even on a conventional level. Chandrakirti points out that we can understand their existential status by means of understanding their conventional reality, but even that conventional reality itself is empty. According to Chandrakirti, inherent existence is simply false, and its negation constitutes the final understanding of emptiness. Okay, so we will stop here for today, and tomorrow we'll start with the next one, emptiness and dependent origination. So we are speeding through, but this is actually quite important. You know, because this comes again and again, and it's really touching at, you know, what we're holding on to. Okay, a couple of minutes for questions, comments. Yeah?
I find that, especially working in the shop, if I try and have a mind of that, you know, if I'm working at some process and I have a mind that it's got to be this way, or, you know, I was trying to loosen a bolt the other day, and I was trying this different ways to secure this so I could do this or that, and you know, I had a pretty calm mind. But once I had the mind that, you know, that said it was stuck and it won't come off, once I solidified it, then I got really angry. Yep. But up until that point, I was fine. But yeah. Once I labeled it.
Yeah. It's not coming off from its own side.
Yep.
I'm angry. Yeah. So you can see there how ignorance, that grasping at true existence, sets the stage for the affliction of anger. Yeah.
How did true existence and inherent existence come to have different meanings?
Because Baba Viveka said it had to be like that. And yeah, he just said that that's how we define those two things different. And Chandrakirti said, no, actually, if you say that there has to be a non-defective consciousness perceiving the object for it to conventionally exist, then that's the same as saying that inherent existence means true existence. Yeah. Okay. Mm-hmm. So what we find there is that the different tenet systems may define different terms differently. But Prasangika, when it talks about these tenet systems, will use the definitions that those tenet systems give those terms. And Prasangika will say they all amount to inherent existence, true existence. They all boil down to the same thing. Yeah.
So this one part here that says that Chandrakirti points out that even on the conventional reality itself is empty. There's a section in Geshe Dado's teachings on chapter 9. He goes through how conventional, that thermos, forget the ultimate nature is empty, but even to try to find the conventional thermos, it's hard to find when you start to take it apart. Because I have my mind saying, okay, it's empty of inherent existence.
But conventionally,
it really
thermos.
is there. It's not findable there either. It's even more obvious that it's not inherent. It's got all these parts and pieces and causes. But boy, I just want to separate those out and make one okay and one just fine the way it is.
Yeah, that's why Chandrakirti is refuting inherent existence, both on the ultimate level and the conventional level.
That's okay with thermoses, but then when you start talking about the mind, you know, there's the flow of knowing, and yet there are these thoughts that are coming from somewhere and seem to be directing the show. And
yeah,
it's like,
there seems to be some real person having a real motivation.
how do you explain
in
that?
There. Just different mental factors arising at that moment.
Due to what? Habit? Just habit?
Due to previous causes. Mental factors are impermanent phenomena. They depend on causes.
Hopefully a little enlightened activity in there as well, but...
Well, that's what we're trying to put in there. Okay? Yeah, but it seems, like there's somebody who, really is doing the designating. There's somebody who really is experiencing the pain.
It seems like an 8-ball. You know those old 8 balls you'd turn over and some thought would come up? Did you ever have those as a kid?
No.
You know what I'm talking about.
Upside down 8 balls?
No commonly appearing object. Sorry. Okay. Anyway, it seems like it just comes from nowhere.
There's always, for anything to arise, there has to be a cause. Otherwise, okay, you see, you believe in a permanent creator God after all. That out of nothing, creation happened. God was permanent, created the universe, but permanent, even though permanent things cannot create, somehow he did it. As soon as you're talking about things arising, they're dependent. Yeah? They're dependent. And we always think, no, there's got to be something in there, in my motivation. Otherwise, where did that motivation come from? It's just different mental factors. Well, isn't there one person saying, I want to have this mental factor? Well, okay, who is that person that's saying that then? Is that person the mental factor that it wants to have? No, It can't be that because otherwise it would already have it. Is the person the mental factor that doesn't have that other mental factor but wants to have it? Well, then why does it want to have it? It's a mental factor in its own right. It's not performing its own function. It's not doing what that one's doing. I mean, you just get, when you try and find something that is inherent in there, you start, I mean, this is what we're encouraged to do.
Confusion is a good thing.
Yes. Yeah. I think I told you that when Geshe Sonam Rinchen was teaching us the text, that he would get us so confused. Yeah. And because this would be exactly, you have to think about it and figure out, applying reasoning, what is true and what isn't true. You can't just say, but Nagarjuna said, yeah. And Chandakirti's on his side. Somebody's going to say, but Baba Viveka said, yeah. Okay.